Benjamin discovered that God was testing his heart when he found himself hiding behind the church dumpster with a burnt piece of fish in his hand, whispering a curse he would never have said near the sanctuary. While a homeless man in his dead father's coat asked him why Christians always smelled angry when they were trying to serve. The church fish fry had been Benjamin's idea, a simple outreach, he had called it. Hot food, prayer cards, blankets, music, a short message, no pressure. The kind of event that looked beautiful in planning meetings and became war by lunchtime. The fryer stopped working. The volunteer with the key to the pantry went to the wrong campus. Someone bought frozen fillets instead of fresh. The coffee urn leaked across the fellowship hall floor. The youth group used the good napkins for a game involving blindfolds and peanut butter. And Benjamin, who had preached more than once that the heart is revealed under pressure, had spent the last hour snapping at everyone who had the misfortune of being within range of his righteousness. Then the wind blew smoke from the outdoor grill straight into his eyes. The fish blackened on one side, and he threw the ruined piece into the trash so hard it bounced out and landed at his feet like evidence. That was when the man in his father's coat spoke. "You are right, preacher." Benjamin was not a preacher. He was a deacon, a contractor, a widower, a man people trusted with budgets, repairs, funerals, and emergencies because he looked steady even when he was not. But the man called him preacher because Benjamin had a Bible in his back pocket and the dangerous posture of someone who thought carrying scripture made him safer than other people. Benjamin turned. The man was sitting on an overturned milk crate beside the dumpster, eating from a paper plate balanced on his knees. His beard was tangled. His shoes were split at the sides. His hands were red from cold, and the coat around his shoulders was unmistakable. Dark brown canvas, torn near the left cuff, patched at the elbow with black thread. Benjamin's father's coat. The one Benjamin had donated that morning after keeping it in a closet for 4 years because he could not bear to wear it and could not bear to give it away. He had placed it in the clothing bin without looking too closely, as if grief could be obeyed quickly and left behind. Now the coat had returned on the shoulders of a stranger who smelled faintly of smoke and river water. Benjamin stared at it. "Where did you get that?" The man looked down. "Billed cold. It was my father's." The man's face changed. Suspicion first, then apology. He began to pull it off. "You want it back?" Benjamin should have said no immediately. Instead, he hesitated. The hesitation was small, ugly, revealing. The man saw it. So did Benjamin. The burnt fish lay between them. Smoke drifted over the parking lot. From inside the church, people were singing a worship song about surrender. Benjamin heard the words surrender float out through the propped open fellowship hall door and almost laughed. The man slowly settled the coat back onto his shoulders. "He dead?" Benjamin nodded. 4 years. "Good coat. He wore it fishing." "You fish?" "Not anymore." "Why not?" Benjamin looked away toward the lake behind the church property, gray under the winter sky. His father had taught him to fish on that lake before the housing developments, before the new bridge, before the church expanded, before Benjamin learned how quickly a heart can become useful to everyone and close to God at the same time. In his garage, hanging over the workbench, was his father's old fishing net, ash handle, cotton mesh, torn on one side where a hook had caught years ago. Benjamin had never repaired it, never thrown it away. It hung there like an unfinished conversation. "I got busy," he said. The man chewed slowly, then pointed with his fork toward the church. "Busy being angry?" The question landed harder than it should have because it was spoken without judgment, only observation. Benjamin looked at the burnt fish, the coat, the stranger, the church, the lake, and felt something inside him begin to tear. Not dramatically, more like old fabric finally admitting the strain. That was the first teaching from Peter. God often tests the heart by putting pressure on the place where our confident words have outrun our actual love. Peter was never short on words. "Even if all fall away, I will not. I will lay down my life for you. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." He spoke boldly, and some of his words were true. Jesus did not despise Peter's passion, but passion untested can mistake itself for faithfulness. So God allowed pressure, a servant girl, a charcoal fire, a question. You also were with him. And the man who said he would die with Jesus denied knowing him before morning. Benjamin had always heard that story with sympathy. Poor Peter, frightened Peter, impulsive Peter. He had not realized how often he did the same thing in cleaner clothes. He confessed Christ on Sunday and denied his character on Monday with his tone. He sang of surrender and clutched a donated coat in his heart. He called the fish fry outreach and treated volunteers like obstacles. He believed the gospel and behaved as if inconvenience were persecution. The test had not created the condition of his heart. It had revealed it. The man in the coat held out his plate. You want this piece? Mine ain't burned as bad. Benjamin blinked. You're offering me food at my own outreach? Seems like you need mercy. That sentence should have been absurd. It was holy. Benjamin sat on a milk crate beside him, not because the schedule allowed it, not because the fish had stopped burning, not because the event no longer needed him, but because his soul had been caught by the net of God and dragged to the surface. What's your name? He asked. Ray. Benjamin. I know. People keep saying, ask Benjamin. Benjamin knows. Benjamin handles it. Benjamin has the list. Ray took another bite. That why you mad? Benjamin stared at him. You ask a lot of questions. People who live outside learn to notice weather, faces, voices, whether a room is safe, whether kindness is about to become a bill. Benjamin looked down at his hands. They smelled like smoke, fish, and sanitizer. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For hesitating about the coat. Ray shrugged. Grief grabs weird. Benjamin swallowed. That was more grace than he deserved from a stranger in a dumpster corner. He looked at the brown canvas again. His father's coat had looked almost sacred in the closet. On Ray, it looked useful, warm, alive. The coat had finally become what it was made for. Maybe love was like that too. Not preserved in closets, given away until someone cold could live through the night. That was the second teaching from Peter. God tests the heart by asking whether we will receive his purposes when they do not protect our sentimentality. Peter knew nets, boats, fish, weather. He knew the lake, the night labor, the empty catch, the ache of hands after pulling in nothing. Then Jesus stepped into his world and filled his nets so heavily they began to break. Peter fell at his knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." But Jesus did not leave. He said, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will fish for people." God did not destroy Peter's old life by calling him. He transformed its meaning. Nets became mission. Boats became pulpits. A fisherman's hands became apostolic hands. But transformation required release. Peter had to leave the miraculous catch behind to follow the one who gave it. Benjamin thought of his father's coat, his father's net, his own need to keep grief under glass. Maybe God was not taking his father from him again. Maybe God was teaching him that love, like a net, is not beautiful because it hangs untouched in a garage. It is beautiful when it gathers the living. Ray finished his fish and wiped his mouth with a napkin. You going back in? Benjamin looked at the fellowship hall door. Through it he saw chaos. Elaine from the kitchen waving toward the fryer. Two teenagers carrying soup too quickly. Pastor Marcus speaking to a family near the entrance, a child crying because someone had given him the wrong cookie, and Benjamin's sister, in-law, Joanna, looking around with the expression of a woman, about to ask where he had disappeared. I have to. Ray stood and adjusted the coat. Maybe don't go in like thunder. Benjamin almost smiled. I'll try. Try quieter. He went inside. Joanna met him halfway across the fellowship hall. Where were you? He inhaled. The old answer came ready, handling something, checking the grill, doing what no one else was doing. Instead, he said, hiding by the dumpster because I was angry. Joanna stared. That is unexpectedly specific. I snapped at people. Yes. You noticed? The children noticed. That hurt. I'm sorry. Joanna's face softened, but not too quickly. She had been married to his younger brother until cancer took him 6 years earlier. She knew grief, responsibility, and the difference between confession and performance. "Say it to them," she said, "not just me." That was the third teaching from Peter. God tests the heart by humbling us publicly, where pride would prefer private regret. After Peter denied Jesus, he wept bitterly, but his restoration did not remain hidden in the shadows of personal sorrow. After the resurrection, Jesus met him by another charcoal fire and asked, "Do you love me?" Not once, again, again. The wound had to be touched where it had formed. Peter had denied with his mouth. Now he confessed with his mouth. Peter had collapsed publicly. Jesus restored him personally and commissioned him openly. "Feed my sheep." Real repentance does not always require a stage, but it does require truth to travel as far as the damage went. Benjamin gathered the volunteers near the kitchen. Not everyone could stop, so the circle was uneven. Teenagers with serving spoons, Joanna with oven mitts, Greg from parking holding a stack of signs, Mrs. Alvarez from the prayer table, 2 college students, a retired nurse, and 1 boy still wearing peanut butter on his sleeve. Benjamin looked at them and felt his dignity trying to escape through the nearest exit. "I need to apologize," he said. A few faces changed, some surprised, some relieved, some carefully neutral. "I have been harsh today. I called this outreach ministry, but I treated some of you like interruptions. That was wrong. I am sorry." The boy with peanut butter whispered to the girl beside him. "Is this part of the program?" Joanna said. "No, but it should be." A few people laughed softly. Benjamin continued, "I'm going to step back from directing everything. Joanna, can you handle the kitchen flow? Greg, the parking team. Mrs. Alvarez, prayer table and welcome. I'll take trash, cleanup, and whatever needs hands." Greg raised an eyebrow. "You want trash?" "Yes." "Are you sick? Being corrected?" Mrs. Alvarez smiled. "That can feel similar." The mood in the room shifted. Not magically. Some people still had reasons to be annoyed, but the air loosened. Benjamin took out trash, wiped tables, carried water, refilled napkins without making napkins a moral issue. He apologized to the teenager he had snapped at earlier for moving too slowly with the soup. He apologized to Elaine for questioning her system. He apologized to the youth group for calling their peanut butter game evidence of civilization's decline, though he privately maintained the phrase had merit. By evening, he was exhausted, but not in the old way. The event did not run perfectly. In some ways, it ran better after he stopped trying to be its Lord. That was the fourth teaching from Peter. God tests the heart by asking whether we can serve from the low place after we have been corrected. Peter was not restored so he could recover his image. He was restored so he could feed sheep. Jesus did not say, "Peter, do you love your reputation?" He did not say, "Do you love being seen as strong?" He asked, "Do you love me? Then feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep." Love for Christ had to become care for people, not control over people, not irritation at needy sheep for being sheep, care. Benjamin understood that better with a trash bag in his hand than he had in years of meetings. Sheep are inconvenient. They wander, they smell, they bite each other, they require patience. Jesus still calls them mine. If Benjamin loved Jesus, he could not despise the mess of people Jesus loved. Near 7, a cold rain began. The outdoor tables had to be moved inside. The fellowship hall became crowded and humid with wet coats. Ray came in with several others from the river camp. Benjamin saw his father's coat near the entrance and felt the old ache, but now it did not tighten into possession. He went to Ray. "Warm enough?" Ray patted the coat. "Your father knew fabric. He knew fish too. You still mad?" "Less. That's something." Benjamin smiled. "Yes." Ray looked around the room. "You people always do this." "No, you should." The words were simple, maybe more prophetic than polished. Benjamin nodded. "We should." At the prayer table, Mrs. Alvarez was speaking with a woman whose hands trembled around a cup of coffee. Near the kitchen, Joanna had command of the serving line with terrifying grace. The teenagers were carrying blankets. Pastor Marcus knelt beside a little boy whose shoe had broken. The room was chaotic, imperfect, alive. Benjamin saw it and thought of Peter stepping out of the boat. People often focus on the sinking. But before he sank, Peter stepped. He heard Jesus say, "Come," and he moved toward him on water. Then the wind frightened him, and he began to go down. "Lord, save me," he cried. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand. That was the fifth teaching from Peter. God tests the heart by inviting us to step toward him, then exposing what winds we still fear. Benjamin had stepped into ministry many times, but often only where he could control the conditions. Budgets, plans, teams, backup plans, supplies. He liked obedience that came with structural support. Peter's water step was different. It revealed both faith and fear. The saving hand was real. Jesus did not let Peter drown because his faith trembled. He caught him and asked, "Why did you doubt?" Not to shame him into paralysis, but to show him the wind had become larger in his eyes than the Lord standing before him. Benjamin wondered how much of his anger came from wind. Fear of failure, fear of being seen as incompetent, fear that ministry would expose his grief, his limits, his need, fear that if he did not hold everything together, something would sink. Fear that if he did not hold everything together, something would sink. And perhaps Jesus was not only asking him to step, perhaps Jesus was asking him to be honest about what winds ruled his face once he did. At 8, the power went out. Not just a flicker, full darkness. The fellowship hall gasped. Children cried. Someone dropped a tray. The emergency lights clicked on dimly, painting faces in red and gray. Rain hammered the windows. For a moment, no one moved. Benjamin felt every old instinct leap alive. Take command, raise voice, fix everything, make no one see uncertainty. Then he heard Peter again, not on water this time, but in Gethsemane. Jesus had asked him to watch and pray. Peter slept. The test of the heart was not always public courage. Sometimes it was spiritual attention in the hour when flesh wanted escape. "Watch and pray," Jesus said, "so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." That was the sixth teaching from Peter. God tests the heart by revealing whether we are spiritually awake before the crisis or only loud once it arrives. Benjamin had been loud often. Loud in solutions, loud in opinions, loud in competence. But wakefulness was quieter. It noticed fear before fear became anger. It prayed before pressure became speech. It stayed near Christ before the soldiers arrived. In the dim red light, Benjamin did not shout. He turned to Pastor Marcus. "Generator, storage room, I'll get it with Greg." Then he turned to Joanna. "Can you keep everyone seated?" "Yes." To Mrs. Alvarez. "Can you pray with the children?" "Already starting." "To the room," he said loudly but not harshly. "Everyone stay where you are. We have lights coming. You are safe." That was all. No thunder, no performance. The generator was heavy, old and buried behind boxes of Christmas decorations labeled with optimism eyes. Greg muttered, "Who stalls shepherd costumes in front of emergency equipment?" Benjamin said, "People who believe Advent is more likely than crisis." Theologically, debatable. The road in the dark with flashlights between their teeth. Benjamin hit his shin on a metal stand and almost released a word unfit for church archives. Greg heard the beginning of it and said, "Sanctification paused. Under review." They got the generator outside under the overhang, started it on the fourth pull, and restored enough power for lights, heat, and coffee, which Elaine later called the Trinity of emergency church survival. When Benjamin returned, the room was calmer. Mrs. Alvarez had children singing softly, not loudly, not cutely, softly enough that fear had to lower its voice to hear. Ray sat near the entrance, his hands folded over the brown coat, eyes closed. Benjamin stood in the doorway, soaked from rain, and felt a grief so sudden he had to lean against the frame. His father would have known how to start the generator faster. His father would have laughed at the shepherd costumes. His father would have told him to carry the weight with his legs, not his back. His father would have said, "You don't have to bark to lead, Ben." The memory struck like mercy and pain together. Joanna saw him from across the room and came over. "You okay?" He nodded, then shook his head. "I miss him." She followed his gaze to Ray's coat. "I know. I think I kept that coat because I didn't know how to keep what he gave me." Joanna stood beside him. "Maybe what he gave you was not meant to stay in a closet." Benjamin wiped rain from his face. "Or tears. That seems to be the theme." She smiled gently. "God repeats himself when we are slow." To Robert, the lights were steady and the rain softened. Pastor Marcus asked Benjamin if he would share a short word before dinner closed. Benjamin almost refused, then realized refusal might be humility or fear, and he could not immediately tell which. He went to the front without notes. The room looked at him, church members, strangers, volunteers, cold people. Now warmer, tired people, now fed, children half asleep, teenagers pretending not to care. Ray in the brown coat near the side wall. Benjamin placed both hands on the back of a chair. He said. A few volunteers laughed with feeling, and that revealed more about me than I wanted. I thought I was here to help serve food, but God used burnt fish, a broken fryer, a power outage, and a man wearing my father's coat to show me that my heart still wants control, more than love sometimes. The room quieted. Peter knew what that felt like. He loved Jesus, truly, but his heart had to be tested. On the water, in the garden, by the fire. After failure, Jesus did not test Peter to destroy him. He tested him to reveal what needed grace and to make him ready to feed sheep. Benjamin looked at Ray. Some of us think a test from God is only a tragedy, a sickness, a loss, a closed door. Sometimes it is, but sometimes the test is a person who needs the thing you wanted to keep. Sometimes it is an interruption. Sometimes it is criticism. Sometimes it is being asked to apologize. Sometimes it is being trusted with people who do not make you feel successful. Do you believe I acted like ministry was mine today? I was wrong. It belongs to Jesus. If I treated you like problems instead of people, I was wrong. You are not my test to pass. You are people Christ loves. The test is whether my heart will love him by loving you. That was the seventh teaching from Peter. God tests the heart by asking whether our love for Jesus becomes love for his people. After the resurrection, Jesus did not ask Peter for strategic plans, doctrinal statements, or emotional explanations first. He asked, "Do you love me?" Then he pointed him towards sheep. Heart tested by failure becomes useful only when love turns outward. If Peter had used restoration to rebuild his self-image, he would have remained small. Jesus turned his love into shepherding. Feed them, tend them, care for them. Benjamin stepped away from the chair. "We're going to keep dinner open while the weather is bad. We will need help. Not impressive help. Real help. Clean up. Rides. Blankets. Listening. Prayer. If you came to be served, receive without shame. If you came to serve, do it without superiority. If you came because you are not sure why you are here, welcome. That makes several of us." Ray raised his paper cup slightly. "Amen to that, preacher." This time, Benjamin did not correct him. The night stretched long. People ate. Some left, some stayed. Volunteers signed up for shifts. The power flickered once more, but held. Around 10, Benjamin stepped outside under the awning. Rain had turned to mist. The lake beyond the church was invisible in the dark, but he could smell it. Cold water, mud, leaves. Ray joined him, pulling the coat tight. "Your old man," Ray said. "What was he like?" Benjamin leaned against the brick wall. "Quiet. Better with tools than words. He could fix almost anything except himself." Ray nodded as if that made sense. "Mine was loud. Fixed nothing." They stood in silence. Then Ray said, "You got more coats?" "Yes. There are people by the south underpass colder than me. Benjamin looked at him. "You could have taken another coat and left." Ray shrugged. "Could have. Why tell me?" "Because the coat fit." Benjamin did not understand. Ray continued. "Sometimes when something fits, you remember people are supposed to help each other." He turned to go back inside. "Also because I ain't carrying coats alone in this rain." Benjamin laughed, then went in and gathered blankets, socks, coats, hot coffee, and 2 volunteers. Before leaving, he grabbed his truck keys from the office. On the wall beside the keys hung an old framed photograph from a men's fishing retreat years ago. His father stood in the back row, wearing the same brown coat, holding a net with a tear in it, laughing at something outside the frame. Benjamin touched the frame once, then he took the keys. At the south underpass, the rain smelled like concrete and exhaust. They found 6 people near a retaining wall, wrapped in tarps and sleeping bags. One woman refused help at first, saying churches always wanted names. Ray said, "This one mostly wants to stop burning fish." She looked at Benjamin. "You the fish burner, unfortunately. You got coffee?" "Yes." "Then I accept your repentance." They gave out coats and blankets. Benjamin knelt to help a man whose hands were too stiff to button his jacket. The man kept apologizing. Benjamin said, "No apology needed." Then thought of Peter in Acts chapter 3, saying to the lame man at the temple gate, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you." That was the 8th teaching from Peter. God tests the heart by revealing whether we will give what we actually have, not hide behind what we lack. Benjamin could not fix the housing crisis. He could not rewrite every broken story beneath the bridge. He could not undo his father's death, Ray's past, the storm, the failures of systems larger than one church. But he had coats, coffee, a truck, a church basement, a voice that could apologize, a heart being corrected. Peter did not give the beggar what he did not have. Many hearts hide from obedience behind the size of the need. Because we cannot do everything, we excuse ourselves from doing the thing in our hand. God tests that, not to shame finite people for being finite, but to free them from the lie that love must be total to be real. On the drive back, Ray fell asleep in the passenger seat, the brown coat pulled up around his chin. Benjamin drove slowly through wet streets. The volunteers in the back seat were quiet. At a red light, Benjamin looked over at Ray and thought again of Peter and Cornelius. Peter, raised with boundaries that shaped his whole religious world, saw a vision of unclean animals and heard, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." Then he entered the house of a Gentile, listened, preached Christ, and watched the Holy Spirit fall on people he once would have kept at a distance. That was the 9th teaching from Peter. God tests the heart by bringing us to people we would naturally keep outside and asking whether we will follow the Spirit across the line. Benjamin had lines, not always cruel ones, respectable lines, familiar lines, vines made of class, comfort, schedule, smell, vocabulary, politics, grief, fear. Lines that said, "These people are safe, those people are complicated, these people will appreciate help, those may misuse it, these belong in church leadership, those belong in outreach reports." Peter had to learn that God was not asking permission from Peter's categories before pouring out grace. Benjamin was learning the same in a truck that smelled like coffee, wet wool, and his father's coat. When they returned to the church, most of the fellowship hall was quiet. People slept in chairs and on mats. The generator hummed outside. Joanna had fallen asleep at a table with her head on her folded arms. Pastor Marcus was stacking cups alone, badly. Benjamin took the stack from him. "You are terrible at that. I am gifted in other areas." Allegedly, Pastor Marcus smiled. "How was the underpass?" Benjamin looked toward Ray, who had gone back inside and was now placing extra socks near the door for others. "Holy," he said, "and wet. Often both." Near midnight, Benjamin finally went home. Thea's $1 move. His wife had died before they could grow old enough to complain about growing old. He lived alone with too many tools, too many receipts, and a garage full of things that belonged to men who no longer walked into the room. He turned on the garage light. There, above the workbench, hung his father's fishing net, ash handle, cotton mesh, torn side, dust along the frame. Benjamin stood beneath it, still wearing rain-damp clothes, and realized he had been preserving the net in the exact condition grief had left it, torn, revered, unused. He took it down. Handle felt familiar, almost warm. On the workbench lay a spool of cord, a small awl and pliers. His father had taught him how to mend netting, but Benjamin had avoided the task because repair felt like admitting the past would not return. Now he sat on the stool and began. One knot, then another, uneven at first. The mesh resisted, then held. As he worked, the teachings of Peter moved through him, not like a list, but like a net being mended, strand by strand. Words tested by pressure, sentiments surrendered to purpose, repentance made public enough to heal what pride had harmed. Love for Jesus turned into care for sheep. Faith stepping onto water and admitting fear. Wakefulness before crisis. Humility after failure. Giving what is actually in your hand. Crossing lines when the Spirit leads. The net did not become new. The repaired section was visible. It would always be visible, but the tear no longer ruled the shape. Benjamin tied the final knot and held the net up to the garage light. It cast a shadow on the wall, a web of lines and openings, strong because each strand depended on the others. He thought of Peter again at the end of John's Gospel, after the questions of love, after the command to feed sheep, when Jesus told him that one day others would stretch out his hands and lead him where he did not want to go. Then he said the same words he had said the beginning, "Follow me." The heart is not tested once. Peter was tested in calling, in fear, in failure, in restoration, in ministry, in prejudice, in suffering, in leadership, in love. Again and again, Jesus brought him back to the same command. Follow me, not follow your confidence, not follow your shame, not follow your categories, not follow your categories, not follow your grief, not follow your need to be strong. Follow me. Benjamin placed the repaired net by the door instead of back on the wall. That seemed important. A wall was for memorials. A door was for things that might be used again. The next morning was Sunday. He arrived at church before sunrise. The sky over the lake was still dark, but a pale line of gold had begun to gather at the horizon. Ray was awake, sitting near the entrance in the brown coat. "You came back," Ray said. "It's my church. That don't always mean people come back." "There." Benjamin held up the net. "I repaired something." Ray looked at it. "You going fishing?" Benjamin looked toward the hall, where volunteers would soon wake, where cold people would need breakfast, where ministry would again test the difference between love and performance. "Yes," he said. Ray smiled. "For people, apparently." Ray nodded toward the kitchen. "Better start with pancakes." Benjamin laughed. Peter fished. Jesus cooked breakfast. "Oh, you..." The sun rose slowly, touching the lake, the windows, the wet pavement, the roofline of the church. Benjamin stood for a moment with the repaired net in one hand and the smell of coffee in the air. He did not feel heroic. He felt tired, humbled, and strangely awake. That was enough, because God does not test the heart to prove we are hopeless. He tests the heart to reveal where grace must go deeper. He tests the heart where words are easy and obedience is costly. He tests it with pressure, interruption, loss, correction, fear, people, prejudice, weakness, and love. He tests it beside boats and fires, in gardens and courtyards, at temple gates and Gentile houses, in church basements and parking lots, near dumpsters and under bridges, anywhere the question can become real. Do you love me? And if the answer is yes, even a trembling yes, even a yes that has failed before, even a yes that smells like smoke and rain and burnt fish, Jesus will not leave it as a feeling. He will turn it into a calling. Feed my sheep, strengthen your brothers, give what you have, cross the line, Watch and pray. Step toward me. Watch and pray. Receive correction. Let the old net be mended. Let the coat warm someone else. Let the heart that denied become the heart that shepherds. Benjamin looked across the fellowship hall. Joanna was awake now, tying her apron. Greg was trying to make coffee without looking confused. Mrs. Alvarez was arranging prayer cards. Ray was folding blankets near the door, badly but sincerely. A child laughed in the corner. Someone asked where the syrup was. The day had begun needing things from him already. He gripped the repaired net, then set it near the welcome table where anyone could see the mended tear. Not as decoration, as testimony. The heart can tear and still be remade. A man can fail and still be called. A church can burn the fish and still feed the hungry. Peter's life proves that God is not searching for hearts that have never trembled, never boasted, never sunk, never denied, never misunderstood, never needed correction. He is searching for hearts that, when tested, will finally stop hiding and return to Christ. Benjamin opened the kitchen door. "All right," he said, quieter than yesterday. "Let's feed people." And this time, when the work began, it did not feel like an event he had to control. It felt like a lake at dawn, and somewhere on the shore, the risen Jesus was still asking the only question that could make a tested heart whole. Do you love me?